Sporty sport utilities are great and all, but sometimes they can be a bit excessive. You know the ones I'm talking about, plenty of power and performance, yet not a whole lot of practicality to go along with it. Which is exactly where this BMW xDrive 35i comes in. Outside of some carbon fiber trim and upgraded wheels, there's not a whole lot to tell this thing apart from the countless other X5s you'll see on the road. But it's what you can't see that makes the biggest difference, transforming this perfectly fine family hauler into one that can be fast and fun when it needs to. It's hard to believe the BMW X5 has been on the market for almost 20 years, but it's really within the last few years that the biggest changes have taken place. It's now available with everything from a fuel-sipping hybrid powertrain all the way up to a full-blown M model that will run to 60 miles per hour in about 4 seconds flat. Now the one we have along with us for our test is a base 35i model with all-wheel drive. And that means power comes from a turbocharged straight 6-cylinder engine that makes 300 horsepower to go along with 300 pound-feet of torque. And I'll tell you, there's rarely a situation where you would need more power than that during your daily drive. It's got plenty of low-end torque. All that power kicks in at about 1300 RPM, so off the line, you've got plenty of go. There's not a whole lot of turbo lag here. But our tester packs a huge advantage over the average 35i in that it features the M Power Kit. Now this M Performance Power Kit basically amounts to a factory ECU tune, and it's good for an additional 20 horsepower to go along with 32 pound-feet of extra torque. And that might not sound like a whole lot, but trust me, it's definitely noticeable here. Now, I'm not trying to pretend that this is some sort of chassis twisting monster, but I'll tell you, this 3-liter engine offers more than enough to have a little fun in the X5 when you want to. There's not a whole lot of turbo lag to speak of in this thing when it's in commuter-friendly Eco Pro or Comfort modes, but I'll tell you, it all but evaporates when you have it in Sport or Sport Plus mode. The throttle response is a lot punchier. The mapping is just a whole lot better. It's really, really responsive, and it just adds a nice kick to the X5. It doesn't feel like a big, heavy SUV. It feels kind of like a sports car. Now, before you take to the comments section to tell me how crazy it is to claim that an X5 can be sporty, trust me, I am well aware that an X5M is the way to go if you want a full-blown sport utility vehicle with an emphasis on sport. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that this thing is a pretty damn good compromise when you need something that can do both. The X5M is a blast to drive, but it's kind of on all the time. With this, yeah, you don't get the same level of performance, but you do get a nice dual-purpose vehicle. Now, the thing that affects the X5 the most, aside from the addition of the performance pack that's in our tester, is this drive mode selector on the console. Leave it in comfort mode and the X5 is pretty big and lumbering the way a full-size premium sport utility should be. However, flick it into sport mode and it changes completely. Now, throttle response in this thing is nice and punchy, but if you want other people to know about it, you can opt for the optional sport exhaust, which our tester has been fitted with, and it adds a nice and raspy snarl to the exhaust note when you get on the throttle. not a whole lot of feedback to the X5 steering, but there's plenty of turn-in response, and it makes this X5 feel a lot smaller than it is. The same goes for the adaptive dampers that have been fitted to our tester. This thing's still a little on the cushy side, even in either sport mode, but there's not a whole lot of body roll to be detected when you throw it through a corner, and I've been pretty impressed with how this thing handles the twisties. Now, power goes to the wheels through an 8-speed automatic transmission built by ZF that really is one of the best in the business. It's used in all kinds of applications and with pretty good reason. It gets some sportier programming here, and it holds the gears a little longer than you might want when in Sport or Sport Plus mode. But thankfully, it's been fitted with paddle shifters if you feel like rowing through the gears yourself. Now, I'm usually not a big fan of paddle shifters, but in this application, they make a lot of sense. Once you're done having fun, reach down, put this thing back into comfort mode, and the X5 turns back into a family-friendly SUV. And speaking of family, there's plenty of room for 4 people to fit in this thing without too much worry. There's also almost 36 cubic feet of space behind the second row of seats, which means luggage, golf bags, snowboarding gear, you name it, there's plenty of room to go around. And don't forget that this is a BMW, which means there are also a ton of comfort and convenience features, though they will cost you. Even things like Apple CarPlay will set you back a few $100s, which is a little confusing considering its standard kit on something like the Chevy Spark. I don't understand why they don't just make it standard fare in this thing, but hey, if you're in the market for an SUV like this, what's a few $100, I guess? Now, this version of the X5 has been on the market for a few years now, and it shows in the cabin. It's a little dated. The console is pretty button heavy compared to things like the Audi Q7. It just doesn't seem like it's on the same level. However, BMW has thankfully added a touch-sensitive screen to the infotainment system, which is a huge complaint with a lot of premium vehicles, and I'm glad the tide is finally starting to turn. You know, aside from a few things here and there, there's not a whole lot to complain about in this cabin. The seats are comfortable, everything's well within view and reach of the driver and passenger. Yeah, it might not be as modern as something like the Audi Q7, but it's got all the amenities you could ask for and then some, and it's definitely more than livable. At first, I thought adding all this stuff to a base X5 was ridiculous, and it is, but in a good way. Most people don't need a full-blown M vehicle all the time, which makes this X5 35i a nice compromise. With a few $1,000s in options, it can be as fun as you want it to be, but just as civilized as any other full-size premium crossover when you don't.